Mirror of Yin and Yang. Welcome to the Darkspeak channel, where ghostly, creepy, and haunting stories never end. Today's story is a warning from the underworld, when an old mirror becomes a boundary between the living and the wandering soul. Please listen. On the way back from the afternoon market, Mrs. Han, a gentlewoman familiar with the area, accidentally met a skinny old man sitting under a tree, his hands trembling as he grabbed the hem of her shirt. "Please, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything for 3 days," he whispered softly. Sympathizing, Mrs. Han gave him a hot, sticky rice cake. The old man ate it quickly, then suddenly grabbed her hand, whispering urgently, "Tonight, someone will come knocking on your door. Remember, don't open it. Even if you hear someone calling, don't open it." Mrs. Han was stunned. "Who's coming? A thief?" The old man shook his head, his eyes deep and soulless. "Not a person, a vengeful spirit. A kind of ghost that specializes in demanding lives, impersonating relatives to lure people to open the door." I, at that time, was still young, walking next to her, was so scared that I grabbed her hand. "What does our family owe anyone? Why would a ghost come looking for us?" The old man did not answer, just slowly opened the cloth bag on his back, took out a small mirror, rusty around the edges. "Hang this in front of the door. Anything that does not belong to the living world will be revealed in the mirror. With it, your house will be safe tonight." Mrs. Han thanked me, then hurriedly led me home. The sky was getting dark. She immediately hung the mirror in the middle of the main door, as the old man had told her. Outside, it was drizzling. The wind blew through the thatched roof, making chilling sounds. At midnight, a knock on the door sounded. "Knock, knock, knock." My grandmother was startled, quietly looking out the door. The figure was unclear, but a familiar voice rang out. "Open the door, Grandma. It's Tam. I'm back." Tam, the niece who went missing 3 months ago. People said she drowned in the river near the village. I looked at her, trembling. My grandmother didn't answer, just held my hand tightly. Her voice hoarse. "If it's my granddaughter, step through the mirror." Outside, there was silence for a moment. Then came the sound of crying, a terrifying lament. Suddenly, a bang sounded. The mirror in front of the door shattered, pieces falling everywhere. Cold wind blew in, and the smoke of incense lingered in the air. The next morning, people discovered muddy footprints in front of my house, stretching all the way to the bamboo bushes at the village entrance, and then quietly disappeared. My uncle's face was red with alcohol. He shouted loudly, "Who the hell is that? Get lost." The knocking stopped immediately, and the house fell into a terrifying silence. The wind from the crack in the door blew in coldly, making the oil lamp flicker. I sat close to her, my small hand tightly holding onto her shirt. My grandfather sat there for a moment, then took out a small yin-yang coin from his pocket, placed it on the table, and lit incense. His voice trembled as he said, "3 knocks, stop, then 3 more. Not a human." My uncle laughed. "Stop it, Dad. You've gone crazy from watching too many movies. Can a person knock on the door now become a ghost?" But as soon as he finished speaking, the knocking sounded again, this time slowly, but more clearly, as if each knock was hitting the marrow of the bones. "Knock, knock, knock." A moment of silence. "Knock, knock, knock." My grandfather jumped up and shouted, "No one is allowed to open the door." My uncle was stunned, his hand holding the wine glass stiff. The glass window suddenly became opaque, as if a layer of breath was covering it from outside. We were absolutely silent, while at that moment from the crack under the door, water began to seep out, flowing in long streaks like someone standing in a heavy rain. But outside was completely dry. My grandfather chanted a spell with a trembling voice. The incense on the table began to burn backwards, crackling like wet coal. My grandmother pulled me back into the room, but as soon as I stepped over the threshold, I suddenly saw someone's shadow standing outside the window. I couldn't see the face clearly. I could only see a head of wet hair covering the face, and a pair of white hands pressed against the glass. I pointed tremblingly. "Grandma, Grandma, there's someone outside the window." My grandfather shouted, "Turn off all the lights. Everyone go into the room. No one is allowed to make a sound. My uncle was still standing there, his face drained of color. The wine glass fell and shattered at his feet. My grandfather pulled my uncle inside, chanting a spell while pulling out a red talisman and stuffing it into my uncle's hand, his voice hoarse. "If it gets in, don't look into its eyes." The knocking stopped. The room was so quiet that I could hear my heart pounding. Suddenly, bang, all the lights went out. The house was plunged into darkness. And then someone whispered right behind the door, "Open the door. I'm so cold." I took a step back. The dirt road around the house had been muddy from the rain a few days ago, and everyone who walked by had left footprints. But that girl's feet weren't dirty at all, not even shoe prints. I was about to call her when my uncle glared at me. "Shut up." He gritted his teeth. "Dogs bark. Children cry. Women meddle in other people's business. Tired." I bowed my head, my heart pounding like a drum. A bad feeling arose in my heart. The girl entered the house, the dim light of the oil lamp shining on her pale face. Her eyes were big, her lips were red, her skin was as white as wax. She smiled softly. "Thank you, everyone. Let me sleep for one night. I will catch the bus back tomorrow." My grandfather stopped me. "No, strangers can't sleep in the main house. She can sleep in the kitchen." My uncle wanted to argue, but he only said one sentence. "She doesn't have a shadow." The whole house was dead silent. I looked again. It was true. The oil lamp still cast shadows on the earthen wall, but behind the girl it was completely empty. My grandmother hugged me tightly, her mouth chanting sutras. My uncle stammered, "No, it can't be." The girl was still smiling, her face unchanged. Her deep black eyes still looked at each person in the house, as if she was making a choice. She wasn't angry, didn't shout, just asked. Then, "Can I sleep in the coffin behind the house too?" I swallowed, my throat feeling dry as if it was filled with dust. "Xiao Hua." I mumbled a reply. She smiled. This time the smile was no longer as gentle as before, but as if the muscles on her face were stretched, revealing rows of black teeth, the roots of which were rotten. Little Flower, what a nice name, just like that girl. My grandfather sat still, took a drag of his tobacco, and sighed. "Sit down," he said, but his eyes looked at me meaningfully, as if giving a silent instruction. I nodded slightly. My uncle enthusiastically poured wine, picked up some stewed meat for the girl. She sat there, looking obedient, but I noticed she didn't touch her chopsticks. Her hands were placed on her thighs. Her fingers were unusually long. The knuckles were concave like the roots of a dead tree. Every time someone said something, that finger would twitch slightly. She looked up at me. Her eyes were as deep as a grave. I swallowed hard, turned away. After eating, my uncle volunteered to make a bed for the strange guest in the outer room, which was originally a place to keep offerings. I frowned. "Which girl?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were still staring at me. Those black eyes seemed to want to suck me in, so deep that I couldn't see the bottom. Then suddenly, she bent down, picked up a handful of raw rice, put it in her mouth, and chewed it greedily. The sound was dry, teeth chattering like broken bones. I retreated, trembling, thinking only one thing in my head. She is not human. She is a ghost, a real ghost. As I turned to run away, she called out, "Xiao Hua, that girl lied to me too. Did you lie?" I did not dare to turn around. I ran straight to the kitchen, where my grandmother was waiting. I told her everything. My grandmother trembled. As she spoke, she took out a yellowed amulet and stuffed it into my pocket. "You cannot sleep tonight. Absolutely do not take your eyes off her." That night, the wind howled through every crack in the door. The dog barked all night long. In the west room, there was a whispering sound like someone was telling a story, the sound of fingernails scratching on the wooden floor, and even a soft lullaby. But there were no children in the house. Near dawn, my grandfather returned. His shirt was soaked with dew, and he held a small brown bottle of water in his hand. Cow's tears. He told me and her to sit still, and then headed toward the west room. The door to the room opened, Silence. Not a sound. A few minutes later, he came back out, his face drained of color. There's no one in the room. We ran in. The bed was still covered in signs of someone sitting on it. The bowl of rice was still unfinished, and there were still fingerprints pressed deep into the uncooked rice. But the girl in the white dress had disappeared without a trace, as if she had never existed. Right in the middle of the floor, there was a small mud print in the shape of a skinny foot, only 3 toes. Before I could react, the girl named Jo Yuan had already swallowed a bowl of cooked rice, wiped her lips roughly, and looked straight at me, her deep eyes like 2 bottomless black holes. At this moment, the skin on her face began to crack in small streaks, like dry cracks after a long winter. Every time she opened her mouth to speak, her breath was filled with the stench of rotting flesh in the muddy water. She smiled, her discolored teeth showing like cracks on an old tombstone. Li Xiaohua, what a nice name, but I don't like being fooled. I shivered. For some reason, that sentence made me feel like I had done something wrong. Even though I was only following her instructions, she stretched out her long arm and picked up the 100 bill I had just placed down. Her fingertips were as sharp as claws, dirty and covered in dry mud and moss. The hellish money in the bowl of raw rice had not yet burned, lying bare like a curse that had not yet taken effect. I took a few steps back. She licked her lips, then suddenly exhaled a thin stream of black smoke, the fishy smell spreading throughout the room. Tonight the moon is waning. The living are more likely to open the door for the dead to return home. This place has good feng shui, and there are hospitable people. I like it. The howling of a dog came from the kennel in the backyard. The black dog howled again, so long that its throat was hoarse, but it still barked. My grandmother heard it and rushed out from the kitchen, pulling me into a private room that was locked. She trembled and took out a small bottle. Inside was a dark liquid. Cow tears. She said, her voice so low that I had to put my ear close to hear. Tonight, you saw with your naked eyes that she was a human. But if you put this in, you will know who is sitting in the living room. I trembled. I did not want to know, but my grandmother was determined. If you do not know, you will not live until morning. I had to pour water into my eyes. At first my eyes burned like they were scalded by boiling water. Then they blurred for a moment, but then the image gradually became clear. The girl in the white dress sat there, but her head was split in 2. Her hair covered her face. Her neck was broken to one side. Her whole body was covered in mud and maggots. Every time she chewed, a stream of black liquid flowed from the corner of her mouth, dripping onto the tile floor like blood. I screamed, and my grandmother covered my mouth. Shut up. If you scream, she will know what you saw for real. That whole night, my grandmother and I did not dare to sleep. My grandfather did not return. My uncle was outside looking for wine, and Jo Yuan, or rather, the thing in human skin named Jo Yuan, kept pacing around the house, her feet not touching the ground, occasionally stopping in front of my door, whispering, "That girl, I remember now, that girl's name is also Xiaohua. She dared to deceive me." The wooden door creaked open. In the western room, Jo Yuan was still sitting on the bed, but now, her previous naive and weak appearance had disappeared. She was no longer smiling nor crying, just sitting there silent like a soulless corpse. My uncle walked in, his face grimacing, his eyes darting around the room. "Hey, miss, my house is small. It's not convenient to keep strangers overnight." Or, before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly stopped, his body stiff as if frozen in the air. My grandmother and I held our breath and looked through the crack in the door. My uncle began to tremble. My grandfather quickly whispered. He saw it. He saw its true form. From where I stood, I could only see his back, but he suddenly took 2 steps back, his mouth open as if he wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then bang, my uncle collapsed, his hands clutching his chest, foaming at the mouth. My grandfather shouted, "Pull him out quickly." My grandmother and I rushed to pull my uncle out of the room. The uncle was cold at that moment. His eyes were wide open as if they were about to pop out of his head. His mouth was stuttering for a long time before he could utter a few words. "No. Legs. She has no legs, just a shadow hanging in the air, her face full of maggots." My grandfather immediately took out a handful of golden amulets, sprinkled water on them, and chanted a spell. He threw the amulets into the room. The fire flared up, no smoke, no smell. Only a screeching sound echoed throughout the house. That girl lied to me. I must get it back. A cold wind swept across the house. All the candles in the house went out. The door to the west room was wide open, but when we shined a light in, there was no one inside. There was only a bowl of raw rice and a patch of cold, wet mud on the tile floor, imprinted with footprints stamped across a pool of blood. My grandfather angrily shouted, "Shut up! What do you know? People stay voluntarily. Who is holding who?" But my grandmother was still not at ease. She pulled me out to the vegetable garden and whispered, "Chuhoa, what did you see last night? Tell me the truth." I glanced toward the window of the west room and slowly nodded. "Grandma, I swear I didn't see wrongly. She had no legs. Her skirt wasn't stained with any mud. And she didn't see her reflection in the mirror." My grandmother's face turned pale, her trembling hands clutching the edge of her shirt. Could it be a vengeful spirit? I nodded, only whispering, "I think she came back to take revenge." That whole day, no one dared to enter the west room. My uncle lay on the bed, his face full of joy as if he had just won a big victory. But I noticed that his eyes were starting to turn red, and several times he was mumbling to himself. That night, after the whole family had finished eating, my uncle suddenly announced, "From tomorrow on, no one is allowed to come near my room anymore. She and I are getting married." The whole family was stunned. My grandfather was livid with anger and shouted, "Are you crazy? We just met her yesterday." My uncle laughed harshly, his eyes wild. "No, we fell in love in our previous life." That night, strange noises came from the west room again. The sound of fingernails tapping on the wooden wall. The sound of someone laughing shrilly in the dark. I covered my head with a blanket, but I could still hear the screeching sound of someone's fingernails lightly scratching my door. The doll was made of cloth, but its skin was as gray as a dried corpse, and red thread was sewn on its forehead, each scribbled line like a handwriting written in a fit of madness. The doll's eyes were not buttons as usual, but two black stones, sparkling red, as if it was hiding something alive. I shivered and stepped back, but the girl was still laughing, her clear voice ringing out, sending shivers down my spine. "Xiaohua, hold on to her. Don't let anyone take her away. She will protect you." I held the doll as if I were enchanted. As soon as I let go of her hand, the girl's body trembled slightly. Her eyelids drooped as if she had lost all her strength. As soon as I turned away, she muttered something in a language I had never heard before. It sounded like the wind whistling through an old grave. That breakfast, I brought her thin porridge and some pickles. She didn't touch it, just sat motionless looking at the doll, then at me, then at the doll again. All that day, my uncle went out, my grandparents were busy with work behind the house. I was in the yard and heard her call my name over and over. Little flower, come here to me." I was scared, hid in my room, took out the jade necklace my mother gave me and put it around my neck. My heart was in turmoil, as if something was crawling inside. Night fell and it started to rain. The wind from the forest blew fiercely, and wolf-like howls echoed from the mountains. My grandmother told me not to leave the room. I nodded, but I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing a soft groan from the west room, as if someone was injured and was scratching his fingernails on the old wooden wall. All night, my family's black dog growled in its cage. Its eyes were red, its fur stood on end. It didn't dare bark, only making hoarse growls. I held the doll tightly in my arms. My palms were sweaty. Near dawn, the noise in my uncle's room suddenly stopped. When I finally dozed off, I heard my grandfather's shrill scream from downstairs. "Tone, what the hell are you doing?" I jumped up and ran after my grandmother. The sky was gray and light, and a light drizzle was falling. In the west room, my uncle lay on the floor, his whole body cold, his eyes staring at the ceiling, blood still dripping from his mouth. The girl, Chu Veen, was nowhere to be seen. Only the doll I had held yesterday remained, now lying neatly on my uncle's chest. The two black stones made the doll's eyes no longer glow red, but pitch black like two bottomless holes. My uncle died. His wrist still had the imprint of chain, but the lock was broken, bent as if by inhuman strength. When the police arrived, no one believed the story we told. They concluded that my uncle died of suffocation, possibly by suicide after detaining the escaped victim. No one believed it, but my grandmother whispered in my ear, "That girl is not human. She came back to pay her blood debt." I believed her, because after that night, my black dog stopped growling, but never went near the West Room again. My grandmother did not answer right away, but stood up and locked the door, then walked the corner of the house, pulled out an old, faded wooden chest from under the bed. I had never seen her touch that chest before. She shakily took out an old red cloth bag. Inside was a small wooden box, and placed it on the table. Her hands were still shaking. She opened the lid. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, written in red ink, strangely crooked handwriting. "The traitor buries the living. The vengeful spirit returns with hatred. The bloody doll leads the way. Retribution appears, destroying the whole family." I finished reading and felt a chill down my spine. "Bury the living?" I swallowed hard and asked. My grandmother's voice trembled. "This story, your grandfather told me once. That year, when he was young, he and his uncle, that is, his younger brother, both loved an orphan girl in the village. She was very beautiful, gentle, and obedient. But then my uncle raped her. I was shocked, my hands tightly gripping the doll that was still wet with sweat. My grandmother continued, "Your father knew about it. So in order to hide it for his younger brother, they took her into the forest together, lying that they were looking for medicine. At night, they buried her alive in a hollow tree near the stream. I was stunned. When they filled the ground, she was still alive. They took a cloth doll and placed it on her stomach, then sprinkled salt on it. Your father said that way the ghost would not be able to escape. But I think she's still cursing the core." My grandmother sat down, her eyes blank. Her name was Chu Veen. I felt the blood in my body freeze. "Chu Veen was the girl the other day?" I whispered. She nodded, her lips trembling. "The night you said you saw that girl without legs, then the doll appeared. I suspected. But now, the doll has recognized its owner. This house will probably not be peaceful anymore." I squeezed the doll, feeling it tremble slightly in my hand. "Xiao Hua, quickly take it to the old tree by the stream, dig a hole and bury it, before more blood is shed in this house." She handed me a small brocade bag. Inside were a few ancient coins, a clump of black hair, and a discolored red thread. "Use these 3 things, sprinkle on a doll before burying. Remember, absolutely do not turn around, no matter what sound you hear." Outside the door, the wind suddenly blew. The doll in my hand, its empty eyes were now bloodshot. My uncle frowned, his voice somewhat doubtful. "A pig gnawing a human face? Father, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Our pig was just born. Even if it bit, it wouldn't be skinned like that." My grandfather sat down heavily on the chair, his face half covered in blood, half covered in anger. "If you don't believe me, then forget it, you unfilial grandchild. Or do you think I want to do that to scare you? If you keep talking, I'll shave your face off too." I stood there trembling. In the flickering light of the incandescent bulb hanging in the middle of the house, his face looked like a possessed ghost. Blood was still oozing from the rim of his ear, sliding down his collar, drop by drop, but he didn't wince. It was like he didn't feel any pain. My uncle was usually stubborn, but this time he didn't argue. He pulled me behind the wall, whispering as if he was afraid someone would hear. "Xiao Hua, did you see anything? Your father's face, what did you see?" I hesitated, then nodded slightly. "It wasn't a pig bite, Uncle. When Grandma was still home, she told me not to open the door for anyone and not to go into the West Room. But when he came back, he went in there." My uncle rolled his eyes, then turned his head to look at the door to the West Room, now tightly closed. Inside was pitch black, no lights, but a soft chuckle could be heard. "Uncle," I whispered, "that girl, her name is Chu Veen." My uncle took half a step back, his face drained of color. "How do you know her name?" I didn't answer, just took out the rag doll from my pocket. My uncle's face immediately changed color. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This doll is from last time. My uncle muttered breathlessly. No way. I burned it. I clearly remember. Suddenly, creak, the door to the west room opened by itself. In the silent darkness, a pale white hand reached out and grabbed the edge of the door. Then a figure in a white dress slowly walked out, long hair covering her face, feet not touching the ground, step by step, walking towards us. I screamed. My uncle hugged me and was about to turn around and run. But my grandfather suddenly blocked the middle of the house, his red eyes staring at the white figure. Zhou, you on your back? The whole family was surprised to see Zhou Yuan walk out. She was wearing a clean white dress. Her long hair was as smooth as silk. Her bright eyes looked around the house as if she was a real owner. She smiled brightly at everyone, especially my grandfather, who had just had half his face torn off yesterday. Hello, everyone. I slept better than I ever had. Thank you for your hospitality. My grandfather smiled awkwardly, glancing at my uncle, who was standing there, pale-faced. A good daughter should be sensible like that, my grandfather said, but I could sense that his voice was not sincere. I shivered. No one noticed a strange change. Only me. Each person in this house, little by little, seemed to have their vitality drained away. On the contrary, Chu Veen became more and more radiant, healthier. At lunchtime, my grandmother suddenly asked me to sit down next to her. Then she took my hand, placed a small piece of paper in my palm, and whispered softly, "At noon today, watch to see what she does. Don't let anyone find out. If anything strange happens, run to the banyan tree at the village entrance and wait for me there." I nodded. Chu Yuan ate very slowly, but did not look at anyone. She just ate quietly and occasionally glanced at my uncle, who now only knew how to lower his head, breathing heavily, looking like a lost soul. After the meal, my grandfather and grandmother went to field. I pretended to wipe the dishes, then secretly followed Chu Yuan. She returned to the west room, but did not sleep. I peeked through the crack in the door, almost screaming out loud. Chu Yuan sat in the middle of the room. In front of her was a rag doll, but this time the doll had hair and a tiny hand attached with red thread, trembling as if it were alive. Chu Yuan used a sewing needle taken from her hair, stabbing the doll one by one. Each time she stabbed, I heard a small moan and blood oozed from my uncle's hand in the next room. I could not bear it anymore and ran like crazy to the banyan tree at the entrance of the village. Just as my grandmother said, she was waiting for me. In her hand was a handful of black ash, along with an old, tattered photo. "Look at this careful," my grandmother said, placing the photo in my hand. I looked at the photo, then raised my head, my whole body cold. In the photo were my grandfather, my uncle, and a girl with a face exactly like Chu Veen. But it was a photo taken more than 20 years ago. On the back was written, "Wedding day, July 23rd. I was stunned, stammering, and asked her, "Grandma, who is this?" My grandmother turned her head to look at the house, her eyes bloodshot. "It's the bride that your grandfather tied up in the room for 3 months. After that, she disappeared. People rumored that she died, buried right behind the house. But I know she never passed on. My uncle started to have a high fever, and he lay unconscious all day, unable to get up. He kept calling out Zhou Yuan's name, as if he was possessed by an evil spirit. His body became increasingly emaciated. His lips were purple. His skin was yellow like a corpse floating in the river. Every night, I heard a whisper in the wind coming from the main room, where Zhou Yuan lived, like a lullaby, but the words were full of ghosts. Go to sleep, sleep. Use your husband's flesh and blood as a pillow. Use your husband's soul as a mirror. Go to sleep, go to sleep. I told her. She nodded very slightly and then said as if breathing, "She is gradually devouring your yang energy. But that's not enough. Once it has chosen a form, it must be resurrected. And to be resurrected, it must have the blood of a relative." I shivered and asked, "So she will kill you?" She looked at me, her voice dropping. "Not only you, I can't escape either." Then my grandmother opened the old wooden box and took out a faded black cloth bag. Inside the bag was a faded yellow amulet. Next to it was a piece of hair that was as dry as a tree root. This is the hair of a girl who was unjustly killed 20 years ago. I kept it because I thought I would need it someday. I was surprised. Is that the person in the photo, Grandma? She didn't answer, but I knew that it was the girl she let escape that rainy night years ago. The one my grandfather forced to marry, then suddenly disappeared in the woods. And now, that spirit had returned with new form. Chu Veen. That night, she told me to absolutely not leave the West Room. She would personally perform the soul-locking chant ceremony, a ritual her uncle had taught her, used to seal the spirit that had entered the body. As the sky darkened, dark clouds gathered to cover the moon. The wind began to whistle through cracks in the door, and I heard the wind chimes hanging in front of the main room swaying unsteadily. The smell of burning incense filled the house. From the main room, my uncle's groans could be heard, both painful and pleasurable. I couldn't help but peek through the crack in the door. Chu Yuan was sitting on my uncle, his whole body glowing as if he was emitting a white smoke. My uncle was unconscious. His eyes were white. His whole body was shaking. On his forehead, small strands of black blood gradually oozed out, gathering into the shape of an ancient word that I didn't understand. Chu Yuan leaned down, whispered something in a strange language, then opened his mouth wide, biting hard on my uncle's neck. Blood spurted out like a fountain. I covered my mouth tightly, stepped back, my heart pounding as if it was about to burst. Just a few seconds later, my grandmother pushed the door open, holding a talisman that was burning fiercely, rushing straight towards Chu Yuan and shouting, "Want to live again? You have to go through my body first." Chu Yuan turned his head. Her face was disfigured, her eyes bulging, her mouth torn, her ears, blood all over. The screams in the middle of the night seemed to tear the sky apart. I didn't dare to look anymore and collapsed behind the door. That night, the sky was stormy. Thunder and lightning rumbled on the mountaintop like the sound of drums echoing from the underworld. I lay curled up in the western corner of the room, the sound of rain pounding on the old, broken roof tiles, water dripping from the ceiling to the ground. In my mind, the image of Chu Veen being dismembered, pieces of flesh thrown into the pigsty, the pigs fighting to tear each other apart, the growling like a hungry demon. But strangely, the angrier the sky became, the more suffocatingly quiet the air in the house became. I fell asleep in a fitful sleep. In my dream, I saw a girl standing in the middle of the woods, her white dress fluttering, her arms holding a torn doll. Her long hair fell down, covering most of her face, revealing only a crooked, bloody smile and two black eyes like deep pits. She stood there looking at me, speaking softly. "Xiao Hua, do you think raising pigs is enough to eliminate my resentment?" I woke up with a start. At that moment, the pigs in the pen started screaming, not normal screams, but the sound of extreme fear. Then I heard something dragging slowly on the wet tile floor. Clank, clack. I held my breath. From a crack in the door, I saw a rotten arm groping its way up the steps. On that arm, she still wore the green jade bracelet that she had given to Zhou Yuan. The wrist was covered with flesh scratches, black blood dripping down. Then a headless body slowly crawled into the room, followed by a human head being held in the arms of a tattered rag doll. The doll's eyes were now sewn shut with red thread and blinked in a disgusting manner. I could no longer keep my composure and screamed. My grandmother rushed into the room, threw a pile of half-burned amulets at me, pulled me into her arms, and continuously chanted an ancient spell in Nam. I trembled in her arms and felt that her arms were gradually becoming cold like the water in a deep well. The shadow of the headless body stopped at the threshold. Suddenly, it burst out laughing. Then the sound of knocking on the door rang out 3 times. Knock, 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 knock. Just like the first night Chu Veen came. She whispered in my ear, "It hasn't dissipated. The resentful spirit is still in the doll. If it isn't burned with the ashes of the wrong person, it will come back again and again." I was terrified. Where did that ashes come from? She looked at me, her eyes gradually filled with tears. "That person is the girl you released into the forest years ago. Her body was never buried. I understood. Chu Veen was her, a resentful spirit returning with the pain of betrayal, torment, and torn humanity. What she needed was not just blood, but the buried conscience of my entire family. My grandmother gently squeezed my hand in response. The old man looked at me for a moment. His eyes changed from cold to sorrow, and he said, softly, "This girl, the murderous aura surrounding her is as thick as mountain mist. If she doesn't get rid of it soon, sooner or later she will be possessed by a demon and die." I quickly buried my head in her shoulder, not daring to ask any more. On the way home, she was silent the entire way. Only when we were almost home did she say softly, "Chu Hoa, tonight you must listen to me. No matter what you see here, you must not go out, you must not open the door, you must not look into her eyes." I nodded, my heart heavy as a rock. When I got home, a cold wind swept past. It was clearly July, but the banana tree in the yard shook as if it had been hit by a storm, each leaf torn and falling. Chu Veen stood in the middle of the yard, her hair long and loose, pieces of flesh hanging from her body like meat hanging in the market. She raised her head to look up. There was no face, just a black mass. The gaps in her face seemed to be bleeding. My uncle lay on the bed, his eyes white, his body convulsing as if his soul was about to be pulled out. My grandfather sat in a corner, his mouth muttering sutras, but his hands were clearly shaking like a leaf. My grandmother began to do as the old man had told her. 2 a.m. She lit 3 incense sticks, stuck them diagonally into the log that had been placed in the southwest corner of the yard. The incense smoke wrapped around the log, a gloomy light gradually appearing like the flickering glow of a will-o'-the-wisp. 2:15, it wasn't raining, but drops of ink-black water fell from the roof to the ground, giving off a strong, fishy smell. Zhou Yuan still stood motionless. Her eyes couldn't see, but I felt her staring at me through the crack in the door. 2:27, my grandmother quietly took out the jade bracelet and dropped it into the middle of the yard. The light was immediately sucked back. The murderous aura around Zhou Yuan began to recede. The rotten skin seemed to retreat from her body, leaving only a vague figure like mist. 2:41. She let out a long scream like the wind whistling through bamboo forest, banging her head hard against the wall next to the yard. Black blood splattered everywhere. The rag doll in her hand also began to sing. Rag doll, rag doll. Someday fell among the thorns. Someone picked it up. Someone burned it. Who hid you in their hands? 2:53. A flash of lightning flashed in the sky above the mountaintop. My grandmother pulled me into the room, closed the door tightly, and blocked it with a heavy wooden board. I huddled in the corner, crying and chanting the spell my mother had taught me when I was little. Outside, the sound of Chu Yuan's laughter, groans, and cries echoed like 100 people writhing in agony. Exactly at 3 o'clock, a thud sounded. The red-hot log exploded. The yard became quiet again. The smell of blood and rotten flesh disappeared. I cautiously peeked through the crack of the door. Chu Yuan was no longer there. Only the rag doll was lying still in the middle of the yard. Its eyes had been gouged out. Its mouth was sewn shut with white thread. Early the next morning, the old man really came down the mountain, leaning on a cane and walking into my house. He picked up the doll and sighed. It was unwilling to leave, but this time the murderous aura has been sealed. From now on, as long as no one calls its name, no one unties the white thread, it will not wake up. My grandmother and I nodded, but when the old man was about to leave, he suddenly stopped, turned his head to look at me. But there is still something that has not been solved. What is it? I didn't say she is a ghost. He put the doll back in front of me, then leaned closer and said, I said, she is a created evil spirit. Someone has harbored resentment, summoned a ghost, and then stuffed it into her body. This matter is not your family's fault alone. My uncle picked up the locust wood, his face pale, sweat pouring down his forehead. He hissed anxiously, "Who taught you to put this thing right at the door of the underworld and then burn it? Do you want to attract a bunch of ghosts into the house?" My grandmother trembled and stepped back, whispering, Isn't that what that old man said? He is just a fake Taoist, only half-hearted. The uncle gritted his teeth. Acacia wood is a yong wood. Yes, it can ward off evil spirits. But if placed in the wrong place, it's no different from opening the gate of ghosts in broad daylight. I looked at her, seeing her face ashen, without any color left. She whispered, as if talking to herself. So last night, did I open a way for evil spirits? The uncle didn't answer, just turned to look at me, his voice urgent. Xiao Hua, do you remember what Zhou Yuan brought when he left? I thought for a moment, then whispered, a doll, a rag doll. As soon as I finished speaking, the night wind from the yard blew in. The door slammed shut as if something had hit it. A child's nursery rhyme rang out, a naive song. Rag doll, who picked you up under the thorn bush. I have no father, no mother. I only have Chu Yuan. My grandmother held her chest and gasped. I retreated and hid behind the uncle. He took out a red talisman from his sleeve, painted with black Chinese characters, his hand shaking but still sticking the talisman straight into the ground in the middle of the yard. At that moment, from the darkness, Zhou Yuan stepped out. It was no longer a human body, but a cloth mannequin, as big as a real person, sewn from torn pieces of clothing, a doll on its head, no eyeballs in its eye sockets, only two deep black holes, blood seeping from the stitches. She limped over, her left hand dragging my uncle's body, a limp, lifeless body. His face was pale, his neck had marks as if it had been strangled with cloth. Zhou Yuan raised her head. A young female voice escaped from the doll's body. Give my sister back her life. I screamed, not understanding anything. My uncle jerked me back into the house, shouting loudly, she's not a ghost. She's a vengeful spirit of my younger sister, who was killed by this family years ago, entering Zhou Yuan to take revenge. I turned to her and saw her sitting down, holding her head in her hands. That year, it's not that you didn't know. When you let that girl go, you hit someone else? I stammered. Who? My grandmother couldn't make a sound. Her voice choked up. It was her younger sister, younger, only 12 years old. The story began to become clear. Back then, my family didn't just kidnap one person, but two sisters, Zhou Yuan and her younger sister. The older sister was released, but the younger sister was left behind, dying tragically from illness, hunger, cold, and fear, her soul unable to rest, her resentment piled up, and she finally entered the body of Zhou Yuan, the older sister, to become a ghost. When Zhou Yuan first came here, she wasn't completely alive, but had been possessed by her younger sister. Now, the ghost has risen, the seal has loosened, another door has begun to open, not just to avenge one life, but to cleanse the blood of an entire generation of unjust souls buried in these mountains and forests. The old man stood outside the door, holding a bamboo stick in his hand, his old gray cloth covered in mountain dust. His aged face seemed much more haggard than the day before, but his eyes were strangely bright. He smiled, a smile that made people shiver without being cold. I came to take back what originally belonged to me. I blocked the door. My eyes could not hide my anger. What belongs to you? Is it the doll? Is it the locust wood that opens a door to the underworld? Or is it the lives of my entire family? My grandmother stepped forward from behind me, her voice dropping. Did you send the evil spirit here? And told me to put a sealing ring on it. It turns out it was to force the evil spirit to enter deep into the body, to nurture resentment. The old man did not deny it. He just sighed as if full of regret. I once gave you a chance, but you still chose to keep this house. Chu Veen and her younger brother were originally members of my family. You know that. The words were like a thunderclap in a clear sky. I turned to look at her and saw her stagger a step, her eyes dazed. Impossible, impossible, they are our descendants? The old man nodded. His voice was as deep as a cold wind that crept to the mountain pass. Years ago, Zhou Yuan's father was once expelled from the clan for daring to marry a woman who was considered to have murderous aura. But they lived a decent life and had 2 daughters. When Zhou Yuan was 16, her family heard that the woman had died and immediately sent someone up the mountain to capture their children, saying it was to offer them to their ancestors. I turned pale, not daring to believe it. My grandmother trembled, muttering, It's not me. It's him. It's my husband, forcing me. The old man sneered. You also nodded. Chu Yuan was locked in your stone cellar for 7 days. Her younger sister died in the forest because she escaped. Those two souls merged into one, their resentment never fading. That jade bracelet was to seal them, not to save them. The atmosphere in my house seemed to thicken. I could no longer distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil. I only saw a cruel truth. My family had sown an indelible karma. At this moment, my uncle stepped out from the darkness, his voice as quiet as ashes. You're here? That's good. We'll end everything tonight. The two men stood face to face, like the two poles of yin and yang. The wind suddenly blew, stirring up the dust in the yard. My grandmother knelt down on the ground, choking. Please let Xiaohua live. She is not at fault. The old man did not look at her, only said, Tonight, before the hour tie, I will return to take your lives. If you do not hand her over to Zhou Yuan, then this whole family will become a sacrifice. My grandmother's face turned pale when she heard that. She took a step back, her voice trembling. No, if we do that, wouldn't that be completely letting her out? The old man gritted his teeth, his eyes cold. If we don't tear her apart, her true form will forever be restrained but not destroyed. She will become crazier, more violent. And this little girl, he pointed at me, will be the first target. By then, no one will be able to save her. My grandfather, who had been silent all this time, suddenly knelt down in front of the old man. His voice choked. Grandpa, if you can help, I will count out a thank you 10 times. 100 times is fine. I only have one grandson left. I turned away, not wanting to see my grandfather in such a lowly state. For so many years he had looked down on me because I was a girl, never showing mercy. Now I know how precious my life is, because it can lure demons to be captured. My grandmother quietly pulled out a small copper knife from her shirt pocket and gave it to me. If you see anything wrong, immediately cut your palm. Your blood is the only thing that can delay her. I nodded. The sky began to darken. The wind on the mountain howled in cold gusts. Inside the house, we had torn off all the talismans, leaving only the Chu Yuan body in the middle of the room. The old man told me to sit cross-legged in the middle of the main room, right in the middle of the black ash circle. On my forehead, he drew a talisman with chicken blood, holding a bronze bell in his hand, chanting an ancient language that sounded like a howling wind. The whole room was cold. The oil lamp was flickering, as if it was about to go out. Right when the clock struck 12 midnight, the main room door suddenly opened. A figure staggered in. It was Chu Yuan. Her whole body was bleeding. Pieces of skin and flesh dangled as if they were about to fall off. The stench filled the room. But her eyes, those eyes still shone with a fiery red color, full of hatred. She looked at me. I couldn't move, but I saw her smile. A silent laugh. Only her lips moved. Xiaohua, you look so much like my sister. She stepped into the circle, touching the ash line. The ash suddenly burst into a strange blue flame. The old man shouted, It's time. He raised the bronze bell high, pulled out from behind his back a red coil of hair-tying thread. A howl rang out from outside, a dog howling, an owl screeching, and the sound of dragging iron chains. I felt some kind of force rolling up from the ground. Chu Yuan roared, his whole body emitting smoke, pieces of flesh fly in all directions. But at that moment, my grandmother fell to the ground. From her chest, a deep wound appeared. On her hand, the jade bracelet had shattered. No, it wasn't her. It was my uncle. He secretly changed the bracelet. I was stunned. The old man stood outside the door, holding a bamboo stick in his hand, his old gray cloth covered in mountain dust. His aged face seemed much more haggard than the day before, but his eyes were strangely bright. He smiled, a smile that made people shiver without being cold. I came to take back what originally belonged to me. I blocked the door. My eyes could not hide my anger. What belongs to you? Is it the doll? Is it the locust that opens a door to the underworld? Or is it the lives of my entire family? My grandmother stepped forward from behind me, her voice dropping. Did you send the evil spirit here? And told me to put a sealing ring on it. It turns out it was to force the evil spirit to enter deep into the body, to nurture resentment. The old man did not deny it. He just sighed as if full of regret. I once gave you a chance, but you still chose to keep this house. Chu Veen and her younger brother were originally members of my family. You know that. The words were like a thunderclap in a clear sky. I turned to look at her and saw her stagger step, her eyes dazed. Impossible, impossible, they are our descendants? The old man nodded. His voice was as deep as the cold wind that crept through the mountain pass. Years ago, Zhou Yuan's father was once expelled from the clan for daring to marry a woman who was considered to have murderous aura. But they lived a decent life and had 2 daughters. When Zhou Yuan was 16, her family heard that the woman had died and immediately sent someone up the mountain to capture their children, saying it was to offer them to their ancestors. I turned pale, not daring to believe it. My grandmother trembled, muttering, It's not me. It's him. It's my husband forcing me." The old man sneered. "You also nodded. Chu Yuan was locked in your stone cellar for 7 days. Her younger sister died in the forest because she escaped. Those 2 souls merged into one, their resentment never fading. That jade bracelet was to seal them, not to save them. The atmosphere in my house seemed to thicken. I could no longer distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil. I only saw a cruel truth. My family had sown an indelible karma. At this moment, my uncle stepped out from the darkness, his voice as quiet as ashes. "You're here? That's good. We'll end everything tonight." The 2 men stood face to face, like the 2 poles of yin and yang. The wind suddenly blew, stirring up the dust in the yard. My grandmother knelt down on the ground, choking. "Please let Xiaohua live. She is not at fault." The old man did not look at her, only said, "Tonight, before the hour tie, I will return to take your lives. If you do not hand her over to Zhou Yuan, then this whole family will become a sacrifice." My grandmother's face turned pale when she heard that. She took a step back, her voice trembling. "No, if we do that, wouldn't that be completely letting her out?" The old man gritted his teeth, his eyes cold. "If we don't tear her apart, her true form will forever be restrained but not destroyed. She will become crazier, more violent, and this little girl," he pointed at me, "will be the first target. By then, no one will be able to save her." My grandfather, who had been silent all this time, suddenly knelt down in front of the old man, his voice choked. "Grandpa, if you can help, I will cow out a thank you 10 times. 100 times is fine. I only have 1 grandson left." I turned away, not wanting to see my grandfather in such a lowly state. For so many years he had looked down on me because I was a girl, never showing mercy. Now I know how precious my life is because it can lure demons to be captured. My grandmother quietly pulled out a small copper knife from her shirt pocket and gave it to me. "If you see anything wrong, immediately cut your palm. Your blood is the only thing that can delay her." I nodded. The sky began to darken. The wind on the mountain howled in cold gusts. Inside the house, we had torn off all the talismans, leaving only the Chu Yuan body in the middle of the room. The old man told me to sit cross-legged in the middle of the main room, right in the middle of the black ash circle. On my forehead, he drew a talisman with chicken blood, holding a bronze bell in his hand, chanting an ancient language that sounded like a howling wind. The whole room was cold. The oil lamp was flickering, as if it was about to go out. Right when the clock struck 12 midnight, the main room door suddenly opened. A figure staggered in. It was Chu Yuan. Her whole body was bleeding. Pieces of skin and flesh dangled as if they were about to fall off. The stench filled the room, but her eyes, those eyes still shone with fiery red color, full of hatred. She looked at me. I couldn't move, but I saw her smile. A silent laugh, only her lips moved. "Xiaohua, you look so much like my sister." She stepped into the circle, touching the ash line. The ash suddenly burst into a strange blue flame. The old man shouted, "It's time." He raised the bronze bell high, pulled out from behind his back a red coil of hair-tying thread. A howl rang out from outside, a dog howling, an owl screeching, and the sound of dragging iron chains. I felt some kind of force rolling up from the ground. "Chew!" Yuan roared, his whole body emitting smoke, pieces of flesh flying in all directions. But at that moment, my grandmother fell to the ground. From her chest, a deep wound appeared. On her hand, the jade bracelet had shattered. No, it wasn't her. It was my uncle. He secretly changed the bracelet. I was stunned. I held the paper with cold hands. In the following days, my uncle kept mumbling something, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. The jade bracelet. It hasn't gone anywhere. Hasn't gone anywhere. I rummaged through all my old things. Finally, I found the green jade bracelet, the one my grandmother had given to Chu Veen years ago. But what I was holding in my hand was no longer the jade bracelet. Instead, it was a petrified human eye, cold, sharp, still streaked with purple blood. That night, a strange wind blew. The moon was torn as if someone had scratched it. I stood in the middle of the inn's yard, looking toward the end of the alley, where a girl in white, her face blurred, was standing silently under the lamppost. Her hand was raised high. On it was a bracelet, made of human eyes, exactly like the one I had just buried under the jackfruit tree behind the house. I knew Chu Veen had returned, and this time she wasn't alone. I didn't cry. I just held her hand tightly, the skinny hand that had once shielded me from the wind and dew, that had once led me away from the mud of the past. She left very gently, amidst the bustling sound of festival drums and the full moon hanging brightly above the roof. But I knew she did not go alone in that faraway place. There was someone still waiting for her, a torment that had never ended. After burying her, I stayed in the village for another week. My uncle had been weak lately and needed someone to support him wherever he went. He did not talk much. He often sat silently in the yard, looking toward the misty forest that had not yet cleared, where so many stories had been buried in the past. Before I left, he called me in and placed a yellow piece of paper in my hand. "If you ever come back here, burn this piece of paper by the old well behind the house. It will give you the answer you need to know." I hesitated for a moment, but the next night, I quietly walked out behind the house to the dry well that had long been covered with moss. I lit the piece of paper on fire. Each line of black words burned, the ashes flying into the wind. And then I heard a lullaby, not from the wind, not from my mind, but from below the well, a female voice as light as mist, as quiet as a breath. I sat down trembling, pressing my ear to the well wall. The singing still echoed, vague and gentle as if from far, far away. Oh! The moon falls on the mountain top. The injustice has not ended. My heart still sheds tears. I knew it was Chu Veen. It was not a curse, not a vengeful spirit, but a pain that had not yet been soothed. I looked at the moon's shadow swaying in the deep well, a very strange feeling welling up in my heart. Back then, she was a victim, a human being captured like a commodity, tormented, buried like trash. Perhaps that was why she could not be liberated. I stood up and prayed softly. "Chu Veen, if you are still here, I apologize to you on behalf of this family. Not all of us deserve forgiveness. But if you ever saw me as a child without evil intentions, then please go. Let go of your resentment and find another life." The wind blew very gently. For the first time, I did not feel cold. That night, I had a dream. In my dream, my grandmother and a strange woman walked side by side in the silver moonlit fields. That woman wore a white AO dye, had long hair, a blurry face but gentle eyes, clear as water. They did not turn around. But I knew it was my grandmother and Chu Veen. The two women, one who loved me like blood, the other who wanted to kill me to live again, had finally found each other not in hatred, but in forgiveness. I woke up. The first sunlight of the day shone through the window. That day was Qingming Festival. I returned to the city and started my life over. But every year, on the night of the full moon of the 8th lunar month, I would light a flower lantern, placing the basin of water in the yard, and whisper, "Grandma, Sister Chuvine, if you can hear me, go in peace." Under the bright moonlight, the uncle stood silently in the middle of the yard, sighing deeply. The night wind gently blew through his silver hair, carrying the scent of young grass and ashes. "So it's all complete. Xiao Hua, I have done everything you asked me to do." Her voice was so soft that it almost melted into the darkness. Somewhere, she hugged an old cotton coat, quietly going to see her most beloved granddaughter. There was no more pain, no more resentment, only the peace of comforted souls. The story ended here. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.